Reborn and returned, I stumbled upon Qi Yan in the cave as his potion took effect. At daybreak the next morning, I personally went to the general's residence to sever our betrothal. Main text: in my previous life, we were seen by outsiders as a model couple, harmonious as Qin and Se. He guarded the frontier while I managed our capital residence, tending to household affairs, serving my in-laws, and raising our children, toiling until grandchildren gathered around us. In the 12th month of my 72nd year, a severe cold took my life. In my final moments, my heart ached for him, far away in the northern frontier. After my soul departed, I clung to the white impermanence, the soul reaper, begging him for one last glimpse of my husband. Perhaps my persistent pleading softened him, for the white impermanence finally relented, only urging me to return swiftly. I transformed into a wisp of smoke and journeyed day and night toward the northern frontier. 3 years had passed since our last meeting, and my heart brimmed with anticipation of reuniting with him. Yet the moment I reached Wucheng, the scene before me plunged me into an icy abyss. Amidst swirling snow and wind, the husband I had longed for day and night was carefully supporting an elderly woman with gentle features. Hand in hand, they walked cheerfully into the northern frontier general's mansion. Servants respectfully swept away the snow for them, calling out in unison, "Old General! Old Lady! Mind the slippery path!" The old woman spoke softly, "Husband, you should return to the capital now. Your sister must be missing you." Qi Yan's brow furrowed slightly. He gazed toward the capital, pondering for a moment before slowly shaking his head. He clasped the old woman's withered hand, tucking it into his warm sleeve and rubbing it gently to warm it. "We're both at this age now. Your health has always been fragile. I must stay by your side more, lest we have regrets later." At his words, the wrinkles on her face blossomed into a smile, and she lowered her eyes coyly. At supper, the two huddled together over a steaming hot pot of lamb, feeding each other bite after bite, chopsticks passing back and forth, their intimacy glaring. I drifted nearby, watching this affectionate scene as the fiery passion in my chest slowly froze solid in the bitter cold of the northern frontier. I had once believed such tender, lingering closeness was a warmth reserved solely for him and me. I had firmly believed we were meant to be together for a lifetime, but in the end, it was nothing but a self-deceptive farce. In this circle of noblemen where multiple wives and concubines were commonplace, he likely thought that leaving me alone in the capital, not bringing this mistress of the northern frontier back home, was already the greatest favor he could grant me. To outsiders, I lived a life of unending wealth and a house full of children. I should have been content. But only I knew, during times of war, I sold my dowry to fund supplies for the front lines. While he guarded the border, I guarded our home in the capital with utmost caution, yet he was deep in the northern frontier, sharing passionate moments with another. Now both in our twilight years, he worries about missing that person's final moments, yet never once considers that I, here in the capital, have been waiting day and night for his return. Endless grievances and resentment surged within me. Suddenly, a cold, sinister wind swept through the northern frontier's general's residence, drawing the couple closer together. My rage boiled over. My spirit form gradually solidified, white hair whipping wildly, nails growing frenziedly, and I appeared before them, eyes red with fury. Just as I lunged forward, a soft sigh echoed from the heavens. An icy thread shot down, binding me tightly. "Is this all it takes to become a vengeful spirit?" The voice was as cold as water. "Very well. My mood is favorable today. I shall grant you one more chance. Do not disappoint me again." A chill breeze swept over me, and my soul, shrouded in hatred, suddenly snapped clear. Then, I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, I lay in a pitch-black cave, the sound of steady breathing beside me. My heart jolted. I reached out, my fingertips brushing against a cross-shaped scar. It was Qi Yan. It suddenly dawned on me, this was the scene from the year I came of age, when I rescued him in the mountains after his medicine had taken effect. Could it be? I had been reborn? Before he awoke, I fumbled to gather my scattered garments and slipped out of the cave on tiptoe. Moonlight spilled across the mountain path, wet and treacherous. I descended step by step, guided only by memory. In my past life, he had exhausted me in that cave until dawn, when he finally roused me. The sunlight had been blinding then, only when he recognized me did he breathe a sigh of relief. Because we were betrothed and mutually affectionate, this unexpected turn, though disrupting our rhythm, remained within bounds. But in this life, I never wanted him to know it was me who saved him. By dawn, I reached the capital's city gates. After tidying my clothes and hair in a secluded spot, I headed straight for the thatched cottage my grandfather had left behind. He had once served as chancellor, living a life of integrity. After his passing, he left only this cottage and 10 acres of land by Vermilion Bird Street, granted by His Majesty. With little money, this prime piece of land was only fenced with a simple hedge. I planted some vegetables, but most of it remained overgrown with weeds, becoming a peculiar sight in the capital. My parents passed away early, and after my grandfather's death, all that was left to me was this thatched cottage, the land, and a marriage contract with Chien. Returning to the cottage, I boiled a pot of water for cleansing, then gently placed my hands over my lower abdomen. Though I harbored resentment toward Chien, I never blamed our children. In my previous life, it was this very accident that led to my conceiving twins, a boy and a girl. The childbirth had damaged my constitution, leaving me unable to conceive again. Now, these 2 little lives must have settled comfortably within me. Recalling how my descendants wept until their eyes were red at my passing, I felt immense anticipation for these children, only this time, they would have no connection to the general's residence. After changing my clothes, I retrieved the marriage contract and the jade pendant, our token of love, from a wooden chest, placed them in a brocade box, and headed straight for the general's residence. The gatekeeper, recognizing me, hastily ushered me into the main hall and sent word to the old general and lady general. Surveying the familiar surroundings of the mansion, a complex mix of emotions stirred within me. As the granddaughter of the chancellor, I had been immersed in poetry and literature since childhood, possessing a photographic memory. My grandfather raised me as a son, teaching me statecraft, strategy, astronomy, geography. Nothing was beyond my grasp. Yet simply because I was a woman, I could not take the imperial examinations or serve in the court. I was confined to these 4 walls, destined to waste away my life. In my previous life, I had labored diligently within these walls, only to be betrayed in the end. How laughable it all seemed now. After waiting half an hour in the main hall, General Qi and his wife, Lady Luo, finally strolled in. "How is it that Ling Yun has time to visit today?" Lady Luo feigned warmth as she took my hand, her face plastered with a smile, though her eyes held nothing but cold indifference. Ever since my grandfather passed, their attitude toward me had soured considerably. Without the protection of the Prime Minister's household, I was merely an orphaned girl with a modicum of literary talent. How could I possibly be worthy of their precious son? In my previous life, had I not shared physical intimacy with Qi Yan and become pregnant, they would likely have annulled the engagement long ago. Even later, when they treated me with polite courtesy for the sake of the child, the underlying contempt never faded. At banquets and important affairs in the mansion, it was always the second daughter-in-law, born into the minister's household, who presided, as if they feared I might bring shame upon the general's residence. I withdrew my hand, opened the brocade box, and presented the marriage contract and the white jade pendant to Lady Luo. Her expression darkened abruptly as she said in a low voice, "With Ayen preparing for the military examinations, bringing up marriage now shows a lack of understanding." General Qi's face also darkened. I smiled faintly. "Uncle and aunt, you misunderstand. This marriage was never my wish from childhood, it was my grandfather who insisted upon it. Now that he is gone, I wish only to follow my own heart and dissolve this engagement." "What did you say?" General Qi and Lady Luo paled in shock. Their disdain for the match was one thing, but having me come to call it off was a public humiliation. "Yunling Yun, your grandfather's body isn't even cold yet, and you show such disrespect? How could my son Qi Yan possibly be unworthy of you, to earn such contempt?" In my past life, facing their rebuke would have thrown me into panic. But now, my soul had weathered many storms. I understood their thoughts all too well and felt no fear. "There's no need for anger, my lords. Simply tell me, will the general's household call off this engagement, or not?" Madame Luo and General Qi exchanged a glance, their expressions troubled. Calling off the engagement would be a loss of face, but proceeding meant marrying this unfilial daughter. It was a dilemma. Just then, Qian strode into the main hall, his face lit with delight. "Ling Yun, why are you here?" "I was just about to speak with you." When I explained my purpose, Qian's smile instantly froze. He stared at me in disbelief. Why? You. Have you fallen for someone else? I shook my head, watching his youthful, impetuous expression with nothing but irony. In his youth, he might have genuinely cherished me, but that affection ultimately couldn't withstand another's tender devotion. Long ago, grandfather deemed young Master Chi a suitable match and arranged our betrothal behind my back, never once consulting my wishes. Now that grandfather is gone, I've reflected deeply. Life is long, and I refuse to entrust my future to someone who holds no affection for me. No affection? Chi Yan's body jerked, his eyes reddening as he took a step closer. Then all those words you spoke before, I wish to know you deeply, to live forever without parting, were false? A cold laugh echoed in my heart. Hadn't his vows of lifelong devotion in my past life also vanished like smoke? Those words were nothing but the idle talk of youthful ignorance. Chi Yan's face drained of color, trembling with rage yet forcing back tears. I won't back down. Yun Lingyun, since you've entangled yourself with me, you'll never escape. In life, you're mine, in death, you'll be my ghost. I couldn't be bothered to argue with him. Turning to General Chi and Lady Luo, I stated, marriage is a matter decided by parental will and matchmaker's words. Young Master Chi's wishes carry no weight. You too should make your decision soon. Madame Luo's eyes flickered, clearly considering annulling the betrothal. In my past life, she had always believed my lack of a powerful maternal clan held back Chi Yan's career. It's better to resolve grudges than to hold on to them. Let's call off this marriage. General Chi's words were final. Chi Yan was struck as if by lightning, staring at me in a daze. Suddenly, he drew a jade butterfly hairpin from his sleeve, his voice hollow, "You truly have no regrets?" My heart stirred. This was a keepsake my mother had left me, likely lost yesterday in the cave. Keeping my expression neutral, I even feigned delight. I misplaced this hairpin a few days ago. I never imagined young Master Chi would find it. As it was my mother's, I must ask you to return it. As I spoke, I drew a 50-tael silver note from my bosom and handed it to him. This is my token of gratitude. Chi Yan's face grew paler as he looked at the note. He pressed the hairpin forcefully into my hand, gave me a piercing look, then turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. Madame Luo, heartbroken for her son, shot me an increasingly hostile glance. She promptly urged General Chi to draft the marriage annulment papers, putting an end to the engagement. Clutching those annulment papers as I stepped out of the general's residence, I felt so light I could have floated away. In my past life, the general's residence had been nothing more than a gilded cage. Over a decade of life within its walls had smoothed away all my edges, leaving only numb conformity. Now, finally free from those shackles, even the breeze caressing my face carried the sweet taste of liberty. I headed straight for the capital's most renowned snack street, Hafong, already plotting how to indulge my cravings. In my previous life, after turning 40, I fell ill with a strange ailment. Sweet treats would send me reeling with dizziness and heavy limbs, forcing me to abstain for decades. Now, reborn as a young girl, I was determined to make up for all the sweetness I'd missed. A 15-minute walk brought me to the street corner, where the banner of Chuanxi Tang fluttered gently in the breeze, the capital's most celebrated pastry shop. Stepping inside, the display of pastry molds on the counter made my mouth water. Plump, tempting cherry buns, snow-white guanghan cakes, snowflake crisps, dragon beard candy, jujube paste walnut cakes. The dazzling array left me spoiled for choice. Staring for so long and still not buying? Loitering around like that, don't tell me you're broke and just here for the show? The voice didn't come from the shopkeeper, but a young girl who'd just entered. I turned to look, her features felt strangely familiar. Upon closer thought, she bore a striking resemblance to Chi Yan's concubine in the northern frontier from my past life. Perhaps my gaze was too calm, for the girl grew flustered. She hastily selected a box of cherry biles and a box of Moon Palace cakes, then turned and pressed the cherry biles into my hands, her cheeks flushing slightly. I spoke too hastily earlier. This box is my apology. I saw you eyeing it repeatedly, you must like it. Thank you. I accepted the pastries, curiosity piqued. You're quite observant. What's so hard about that? She waved her hand dismissively, her steps quickening as she dashed toward the door. My young master is waiting for the Moon Palace cakes. If I'm late, I'll get scolded. Watching her vanish around the corner like a cheerful little bird, I suddenly understood why Cheyenne had willingly stayed in the northern frontier in my past life. Compared to me, bound by family rules, every word and action tailored to please my mother-in-law, such a vibrant, spirited nature was indeed far more comforting. But who still remembers that I, too, was once a bright, smiling girl? Returning to the thatched cottage on the city outskirts with the pastries, I sat before the bronze mirror. The girl reflected had a lovely face, skin like congealed cream, brows like distant mountain mist, and jet-black hair cascading like a waterfall, truly in the prime of life. I tried to lift the corners of my mouth, attempting to recreate the coquettish charm of childhood, but only felt my face stiffen, perfectly embodying the phrase "a smile that doesn't reach the eyes." My skin was young, but inside, I was already worn down by the years. Taking a small bite of cherry brioche, its sweet, sticky flavor melted on my tongue, easing my troubled mood slightly. I gently placed my hand on my belly, where 2 little lives were growing. While filled with anticipation, I also secretly calculated, in these times, losing one's virginity before marriage could mean being drowned in a pond. How to give birth to them openly and honorably still needed careful planning. The next day, I returned to Hafong Street, walking all the way to its end. At the street's terminus lay Yuehu Street, a bustling melting pot of all walks of life in the capital, lively yet chaotic. Courtesans from brothels leaned against windows, waving silk scarves and sending flirtatious glances to passers-by. I intended only to glance around briefly before leaving, but behind a large tree at the street corner, I caught sight of a blood-stained hand. My heart leapt in shock. Hurrying closer, I found a scholar lying on the ground, covered in blood. He was thin and gaunt, his cheeks hollow, yet his features held a certain noble spirit, his skin a pale, almost dazzling white. My gaze inadvertently swept downward, revealing a gushing wound, a vicious slash across his lower body. I sucked in a sharp breath and quickly averted my eyes. What an uncanny coincidence. In my past life, everyone said the newly crowned top scholar, Xiaixi, was a eunuch. After entering the Ministry of Rites, he was repeatedly humiliated by his colleagues because of this. Unable to bear the shame, he requested a transfer to the Eastern Factory. Within a few years, he became the dreaded Lord of the 9,000, notorious for his ruthless methods. Every single person who had ever humiliated him was inevitably dealt with by him later. Yet I had once seen him in a temple. By then, he held sway over the entire court, yet he knelt before the Buddha, his expression both devout and desolate. Even if I could silence all the world's voices, I could never find joy. I only wished to be an ordinary man, even if only in the eyes of others. To have a small family, a few children, even if they weren't my own. I hope those words were sincere back then. Without delay, I had him carried to the finest medical clinic in the capital, Huichun Hall. The proprietor knew me well. Seeing me arrive with a gravely wounded man, he immediately summoned the clinic's most skilled physician in external injuries. "Young lady, who is this gentleman?" The proprietor couldn't help asking, noticing my restless pacing in the waiting hall. I offered a faint smile, "My husband." The manager's expression stiffened, astonishment spreading across his face. "But wasn't your fiancé the eldest son of General Chi's family?" "I've already broken off the engagement with the Chi family." My response was cool and detached, offering no further explanation. The news would spread eventually, better to let it come from me. Hearing this, the shopkeeper's gaze toward me softened with pity. To outsiders, after my grandfather's death, I held little value to the aristocratic families. The dissolution of this marriage seemed only natural. Yet, many still trusted General Chi's character. After all, he was famed in his youth for his loyalty and honor. The gambling houses in the capital had even opened betting lines, offering 10-to-1 odds. With no income now, I went to the gambling house yesterday, wearing a veil, and bet 1,000 taels that the marriage would fall through. Once the general's household relents in a few days, that sum will double to 10,000 taels. Just thinking about it brings joy. Since he is your husband, we will spare no effort in his treatment. Rest assured, young lady, the shopkeeper hastened to assure me. It was not until evening that the elderly physician emerged from the consultation room, drenched in sweat. He smiled at me and said, "You brought him in just in time. Though he has multiple knife wounds, none struck a vital spot. As for his ability to father children, well, that depends on his own fate." "Thank you, doctor," I hurriedly replied. His injuries were unusual, requiring costly medications. After paying 150 taels for the consultation, the clinic sent several apprentices to carry Xiaoxi back to my thatched cottage. While he was unconscious, I simmered a pot of light medicinal porridge. Just as it was ready, he slowly regained consciousness. His eyes scanned the room in confusion. When he saw his lower body tightly bandaged and fitted with a catheter, his expression darkened instantly. Ahem. I stood at the doorway holding the bowl of porridge, my cheeks flushing slightly as I instinctively turned away. He immediately pulled the quilt over himself, but the sudden movement tugged at his wounds, causing him to gasp sharply in pain. "You saved me?" he asked, his voice hoarse from just waking. I nodded, moved the small table beside the bed, set down the bowl, and sat down. "I saved you, but you must do me a favor. Otherwise, I'll throw you out right now. I imagine those who injured you are still watching from the shadows. Are you threatening me?" He raised an eyebrow, his dark eyes fixed on me coldly, his gaze sharp as a venomous snake. A chill gripped my heart. Suddenly, his aura felt off. In my past life, during the champion scholar's public procession, I had glimpsed him from afar. Back then, though burdened by a hidden ailment, he radiated youthful vigor, his eyes brimming with the brightness of youth, unbowed by his disability. His drastic change in temperament came only after later disappointments in officialdom and repeated humiliations. Yet the man before me now exuded a weight unfit for his years, devoid of any youthful vitality. He was like me, a young shell housing a soul utterly exhausted. In that sense, we were truly a perfect match. Hardly a threat. More like repaying a favor. A gentle smile played on my lips. Past experiences had taught me to smile calmly at any moment, though it was merely a smile without warmth. He stared at me for a moment before snorting coldly, "That's an ugly smile. Don't smile anymore." I dropped the smile and nodded. "So, will you help me?" After I explained my entire situation to Xiaoxi, he gazed at me, silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed heavily. "This world truly is like a play, yet it delights in tormenting us." I nodded silently. Yes, both of us had been reborn after that upheaval. Such circumstances were indeed bittersweet. Yet I was fundamentally different from him. My heart was filled with longing and hope for the children from my past life. They had always been pure and flawless, never once wronging me. That blood bond was etched deep into my very bones. "Very well." Xiaoxi suddenly spoke, his tone carrying the resolve of one who had burned his bridges. "I will marry into your family and be a father to your children. But from now on, you must let me live in peace. The children will only recognize me as their father. Even their names must be chosen by me, and I will personally oversee their upbringing." I froze, stunned by his unexpected directness. Then I remembered his solitary existence in my past life, unburdened by ties. A wave of bitterness welled up inside me. Some in this world fail to cherish the family and kin they hold, while others spend their entire lives yearning for a warm home, even if it's not the one destined for them. The next day, I sent someone to the affordable housing on Moon Lake Street to move Xiaoxi's belongings to the thatched cottage. Then, clutching both our household registration documents, we went to the prefectural office to formalize our marriage contract. From that day forward, we were legally husband and wife. Over half a month later, the general's mansion finally relented, publicly acknowledging the dissolution of our betrothal. Immediately after, they eagerly forged an alliance with the Minister of Revenue, betrothing their eldest daughter to him. That morning, Xiaoxi, his wounds healing, now able to walk, heard the news. A cold sneer curled his lips, a military commander colluding with the Ministry of Revenue, yet choosing a minister on the brink of disgrace. General Chi's discernment and judgment leave much to be desired. I nodded in agreement while counting the silver on the table. As soon as the general's mansion's announcement was made public, I went to the gambling house to collect my winnings, a full 10,000 taels of silver. My fingers slid over the heavy silver ingots. After counting for so long, my wrists began to ache. I shook out my numb hands, my gaze sweeping around the room as I pondered where best to hide this fortune. Xiaoxi observed my cautious demeanor and chuckled softly, quite the thrifty little steward. Truth be told, when I had the silver transported back to the thatched cottage today, several spies had already tailed me. Yet they only followed to the cottage's entrance. Upon seeing its location beside the capital's Vermilion Bird Avenue, a district where high officials and nobles resided. Upon learning this thatched cottage was the former home of a late statesman, they all quietly withdrew. My grandfather devoted his entire life to the nation, laboring tirelessly until the very eve of his death, still reviewing documents within the palace. He was known for his generosity, earning the affectionate nickname the money-giving boy. He gave away his entire lifetime salary to aid the poor, living out his days in this humble thatched cottage. Now, his beloved granddaughter had won 10,000 taels of silver through her own skill at the gambling house to support herself. What was wrong with that? She said, this 10,000 taels of silver is what my grandfather safeguarded for me with his lifetime of noble virtue. How could I not know this? Yun Ling Yun. Qi Yan's urgent cry suddenly echoed outside the courtyard, tinged with a sense of disorientation. I paused slightly, hesitated for a moment, then rose and walked out. Xie quickly grabbed my arm, his brow furrowed with worry. Shall I accompany you? I shook my head softly, motioning for him to stay inside. Alone, I pushed open the door. Outside the courtyard gate, Qi Yan looked gaunt and haggard, dark circles deepening beneath his eyes. His gaze fixed on me the moment he saw me emerge, but it swiftly shifted to a storm of fury and disappointment, I heard. You went to the gambling house long ago to bet on yourself, wagering I'd annul our engagement so you could win 10,000 taels of silver. Is that true? His voice trembled with pain and disbelief. You schemed even over this. All these years, what did you ever think I was to you? Yes, what did I ever think you were to me? In my past life, I poured my heart out to you, managed your household, schemed and plotted for you, yet when did you ever truly cherish me? I stared at him coldly, but he abruptly turned his face away, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice carried a barely perceptible choke. Don't look at me like that, as if I were some fool kept in the dark. I withdrew my gaze and slowly turned away. I couldn't bear to see him looking like he did in his youth, when he loved me so deeply. Even more incomprehensible was how someone who once adored me so passionately could ultimately cast me aside like a worn-out shoe and turn to love another. I hear you've already been betrothed to the eldest daughter of the Minister of Right's household, and I too have long since married another. Gossip is a terrible thing. I hope you won't come here to bother me again. W.H. What? You're married? He seemed struck by a bolt from the blue, his entire body collapsing instantly. His back hunched slightly as he slowly turned his head, staring at me with a hollow gaze. When did this happen? Half a month ago. Ha! Half a month? He let out a shrill, cold laugh, his eyes churning with fury. So you couldn't even wait until after breaking off our engagement before rushing off with someone else? His eyes reddened as he staggered toward me, a hint of madness in his gaze. Instinctively, I shielded my abdomen and stumbled backward. My feet slipped, and I lost my balance in an instant. Just as I was about to fall, a pair of strong arms caught me securely. My dear, are you all right? The familiar voice at my ear made my tense nerves relax instantly, and I exhaled a long breath. That was close, I nearly fell. If I'd hurt the baby inside me, I might never see my son or daughter. Let her go. Ling Yun is mine. She's mine. Qi Yan's eyes blazed crimson as he lunged forward, snarling, his hand reaching for my wrist. Xie shifted sideways, shielding me behind him and blocking Qi Yan's path. Consumed by rage, Qi Yan sent Xie crashing to the ground. His fist clenched, he swung viciously towards Xie's face. In the panic, I spotted a wooden stick by the door. Without thinking, I grabbed it and gave Qi Yan a light tap on the back of his head. His body went limp, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed unconscious, landing directly on top of Xie. Xie's injuries hadn't fully healed yet. Crushed beneath Qi Yan, he immediately began coughing violently. I rushed forward to move Qi Yan aside and carefully helped Xie up. Coughing, Xie forced a wry smile and quipped, "That man's strength is truly like a wild bull. I thought I'd meet my end here today. Who'd have guessed you're so slender yet pack quite the punch?" I gazed at the unconscious Qi Yan on the ground and sighed softly. He possesses innate strength, a prodigy in martial arts, and a rare military talent. Xiaoxi nodded, his gaze lingering on Qi Yan with a complex expression. Such talent is truly hard to come by. It's a pity we really can't take his life. Seeing his regretful expression, I couldn't help but feel a bit helpless. I could roughly guess his thoughts. He'd likely considered sparing the son while eliminating the father, but Qi Yan was untouchable. In my past life, Qi Yan had fought on the battlefield, nearly invincible. Even in desperate situations, he always managed to turn the tide. In the hearts of the people, he was an irreplaceable war god, far more beloved than his father. The great Qian Empire's frontiers depended on pillars like Qi Yan. So, even though my resentment toward him ran deep, I would never do anything to destroy him. The Empire simply couldn't find another man to replace him. But as for the general's mansion? I had no intention of letting them live comfortably. But we can't just let him off so easily. Xiaoxi stroked his chin, a flicker of cunning in his eyes as he quickly formed a plan: strip him of his clothes and send him to the Chufeng Pavilion. Then write a letter to the Minister of Revenue, instructing him to keep a close watch on his son-in-law and prevent him from making a spectacle of himself in public. I raised an eyebrow, looking at him with surprise. Instead of sending him to General Qi, you sent him to the minister's residence? Are you trying to completely sever ties between the two families? Xiaoxi nodded, his gaze darkening. That Minister of Revenue is no saint. He's been secretly colluding with the enemy and betraying the country for years, his hands stained with all sorts of filthy deeds. Such a treacherous villain must not be allowed to defile the pillar of our great Qian dynasty. If Qi Yan must die, let it be on the frontier battlefield defending our homeland, not in the filthy swamp of this capital city. True to Xiaoxi's nature, both vengeful and capable of seeing the bigger picture. Especially this indirect approach, it's something I could learn from. Sending Qi Yan to the Chufeng Pavilion won't cripple him, but it will utterly humiliate him. It's a small measure of retribution for the grievances of my past life. It will also leave the Minister of Revenue utterly mortified, like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Truly, it kills two birds with one stone. Xiaoxi's injuries hadn't fully healed, and the physical labor of moving someone was naturally beyond my capabilities as a pregnant woman. He asked me for a tale of silver, went out for a while, and returned with 2 beggars. He had them carry the unconscious Qi Yan to the Chufeng Pavilion. Later, I overheard others chatting that after Qi Yan regained consciousness at the Chufeng Pavilion, he first flew into a rage, smashing numerous items, before slumping down dejectedly, his expression utterly desolate. Even more amusing was that one of the courtesans there insisted they had shared a bed, wailing and demanding he redeem her and take responsibility. Just as the scene descended into utter chaos, the Minister of Revenue happened to receive that letter. Furious, he rushed over to catch them in the act. Witnessing Qi Yan being clutched tightly by the courtesan, both disheveled and half undressed, the minister found the spectacle utterly preposterous and utterly humiliating. His fury boiled over instantly. He turned on his heel and went straight to the Qi residence to annul the engagement. In an instant, Qi Yan became the talk of the town, the laughingstock of every street corner and alleyway. After being taken back by the general's household, Qi Yan fell gravely ill. Once recovered, he never troubled me again, as if he had completely forgotten me. He spent his days immersed in the martial arts training grounds, wholly focused on preparing for the upcoming military examinations in the autumn. I paid little attention to these developments. They were all gathered by Xiaoxi's agents and casually relayed to me. News of my marriage had already spread throughout the capital. Many witnessed Qi Yan's provocation at the thatched cottage and his subsequent delivery to the Chufeng Pavilion. We made no effort to conceal it, and the general's residents naturally knew the truth. Yet ultimately, the fault lay with them. General Qi, ever mindful of his reputation, shut his doors to visitors after the incident. The entire residence toned down its former flamboyance, adopting a much more subdued demeanor. 9 months later, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, without complication. This lifetime, I did not marry into the general's household. I was spared the daily morning and evening visits to the elders, the veiled insults from my mother-in-law Lady Luo, and the constant need to tread carefully within the vast, imposing mansion. Thus, my entire pregnancy unfolded in comfort and ease. With ample funds at hand, I frequently invited physicians and midwives to attend to me. Combined with the experience from my previous life, this pregnancy proceeded smoothly from start to finish. Both children were born plump and fair-skinned, with delicate features, nothing like the frail, sickly appearance of their past lives. Xiaoxi's behavior filled me with delight. From the late stages of my pregnancy, he stayed by my side daily, bringing tea and water, checking on my comfort, and tending to my every need. Even at night, he kept watch outside my room, fearing any mishap might befall me. Later, as the weather turned colder, I couldn't bear to see him struggle so. I simply added a sleeping mat inside my room, inviting him to rest there. At first, he hesitated, mindful of the propriety between husband and wife, worried it might make me uncomfortable. I only smiled and said to him, "We are husband and wife now. The days ahead are long, we must learn to adjust gradually." He paused slightly, then warmth filled his eyes, and he readily agreed. The thatched cottage was already old, and renovations were inconvenient during my pregnancy. Now that the children had arrived and our household finances were stable, I hired masons to build a clean, tidy wall of blue bricks around the house. The front yard became a garden, and we added a library to house all the books my grandfather had treasured throughout his life. The backyard became a vegetable garden, with a 3-courtyard residence built in the center, not luxurious, but comfortable to live in. Hanging above the courtyard gate was a plaque inscribed with the characters "Book Dwelling," written by my grandfather long before his passing. The unfulfilled wish of my grandfather's life finally found its perfect conclusion through me. Whenever I think of this, a wave of bittersweet emotion and deep satisfaction wells up within me. My grandfather's life was one of profound solitude. Orphaned in his youth, he lost his wife in middle age. My mother passed away shortly after giving birth to me. My father, his only son, vanished without a trace on the northern frontier battlefield, never to be heard from again. Alone, my grandfather raised me from infancy while managing the affairs of state. Due to our family's poverty, he couldn't even afford to hire a wet nurse. I grew up thanks to the care of the elderly women from neighboring households who took turns looking after me. Therefore, after my child was born, I specially prepared many celebratory eggs. I delivered them to every household along Vermilion Bird Street, from the high-ranking officials and dignitaries to the ordinary neighbors, including, of course, the general's residence. Many people came to offer congratulations and gifts. Setting aside the lavish gifts from the nobility, even ordinary citizens of the city brought cloth and eggs as tokens of their goodwill. No one came from the general's residence, which was entirely expected. The engagement's dissolution had long since severed ties between our families. 20 years prior, my grandfather had saved old Master Chi's life. The Chi family had been profoundly grateful at the time, but after old Master Chi passed, that debt of gratitude gradually faded. After I married into the general's household in my previous life, no one ever mentioned this past. Whenever I casually brought up the old story of old Master Chi, the younger daughters-in-law of the Chi family would sneer and mock, accusing me of exploiting that favor for personal gain. Though I managed to navigate the general's household with my wits and suffered few injustices, eventually even taking charge of the household affairs to secure Qian's rear. Yet every time I applied the governance strategies my grandfather taught me to the scheming within the household, my heart would be pierced by waves of pain. The position of young mistress of the general's household, which others saw as infinitely glamorous, was nothing to me but a gilded cage. Yet in the end, I never received Qian's true heart before my death. Instead, I learned he had long kept a mistress outside, unwilling to spend his remaining years with me. How could I not rage? How could I not resent this betrayal? Fortunately, in this life, I am finally free from that cold inner courtyard. At last, I can live for myself. Xiaoxi adored his daughter and insisted she take his surname, naming her Xia Yundan. My son took my surname Yun, becoming Yun Fengqing. Thus, my grandfather has descendants to carry on his line. He said a loyal minister must have heirs, otherwise, if one cannot even protect one's own offspring, who in this world would willingly serve as a loyal minister? I found his reasoning profoundly sound. Later, I reflected on my grandfather's lifelong aspiration. He wished for scholars across the land to study the great classics. All books should be accessible to the public, not hoarded away, lest they be destroyed or civilization suffer a rupture. He said we must preserve the spirit of civilization to usher in a new golden age. Though my grandfather has passed, I wish his spirit to endure forever. Thus, I posted an announcement opening the library to the public, inviting scholars from all corners to study its treasures. I specified that texts could be copied but not removed. Little did I know I had underestimated my grandfather's standing in the world. The very next day after posting the notice, it drew not only scholars and students but also the Grand Scholar of the Imperial Academy and most of the court's high ministers. This was beyond my expectations, filling both house and courtyard to overflowing. Wiping cold sweat from my brow, I closed the doors to visitors before nightfall. I announced new regulations must be established to prevent today's chaos. Fortunately, these were educated and courteous individuals, all agreed to await further notice. While I was overwhelmed, Xiaoxi sat leisurely in the back garden, strolling with the child and sipping tea. Returning to the courtyard, I saw his relaxed demeanor and felt inexplicably irritated. Especially the look in his eyes when he glanced at me, a hint of schadenfreude. My teeth clenched as I glared at him. Did you know this would happen? He shushed me, chuckling softly as he rocked the two children to sleep. Then he took me by the hand to the inner chamber's water room. A large bathtub was filled with clear water and petals. The hot water is ready. My dear, take a nice long soak and think about tomorrow's plans. I'll prepare dinner first. I sank comfortably into the tub, thinking of how the ninth prince, once feared by all in my past life, had transformed into a devoted house husband for my two children. He now revolved around the hired wet nurse daily, tending to my every need with impeccable care. I should have been happy, yet this man seemed to have lost all ambition. With the imperial examinations approaching, he actually refused to participate, citing the need to care for the children. I suppose it stems from his past life's hardships in officialdom. Later, he became the leader of the eunuchs in the Eastern factory. Though he held supreme power, he still lacked dignity. Recalling what he said before the Buddha, I could understand. He simply wanted a small family, to live as a normal person. Very well. Since he married into my Yin family, I'll provide for him. Then my thoughts turned to tomorrow's arrangements, how to encourage everyone to read without disrupting order. Perhaps the day's busyness had taken its toll on my still recovering body. Lost in thought, drowsiness enveloped me, and I gradually drifted off. In my dream, I actually saw my grandfather. He gazed at me with his usual gentleness, took 10 taels from his own salary, and pressed them into my hand. Grandfather couldn't take care of you, my dear. Take this to buy flowers to wear, buy some treats you like. Don't always be so frugal, and don't shortchange yourself. Taking the silver, memories of my past life flooded my heart. Holding him, I wept uncontrollably. Grandfather, I've missed you so much. Did you think I lived too miserably? That's why you never visited my dreams in my last life? Grandfather stroked my head tenderly. My dear, what's past is past. Consider it all a dream. Besides, it wasn't a matter of life and death. There's no need to dwell on revenge. If you live well, those who wished you ill will find no peace themselves. In the end, you thrive while they suffer. Isn't that satisfying? This was grandfather's philosophy of life, which earned him everyone's respect and affection. Even the chancellor of the enemy nation, who had regarded him as a lifelong adversary, composed a poem in his memory after his passing. Grandpa, in this life, I will live well and make the most of it. My dearest granddaughter is the most obedient. When I awoke, I was already in bed, wrapped in my favorite undergarment. Xiaoxi entered carrying a bowl of steaming noodles. I saw you hadn't emerged from the washroom for ages, so I sent the children's wet nurse to check. Sure enough, you'd fallen asleep in the bathtub. Didn't you fear drowning? Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the children's wet nurse who dragged you out of the tub and changed your clothes. He handed me the noodles, the white broth holding 2 golden fried eggs. I'm thanking you for making the noodles. I retorted irritably. Taking the bowl, I hesitated for a moment, staring at his hands meant to hold a brush. Go buy some reliable servants. Keeping you confined to the inner quarters is a waste. He shook his head and smiled softly. I once believed a gentleman should not enter the kitchen, but now I find the small home in the courtyard is where my heart truly belongs. You needn't feel troubled. Besides, I've been to those lofty heights, they hold no real joy for me. I recalled his cold, gloomy nature in his past life, then looked at his increasingly frequent smiles now, and my thoughts settled. After eating noodles, I went to the next room to check on my son and daughter. Seeing them sleeping soundly, I kissed each on the forehead, growing fonder of them with every glance. In my past life, as they grew up, our affectionate gestures grew fewer, and our conversations gradually grew distant. By the time they started their own families, the most intimate thing we'd do was a brief, involuntary hug when we couldn't help ourselves. Later, as I grew older, I watched them leave hurriedly with their own families after visiting me. Each time, I had to suppress the ache in my heart, hiding behind the door to silently watch them disappear into the distance. Therefore, being able to raise them again in this life fills me with immense joy. The next day, I reposted the notice. The bookstore is currently under poor management and will remain temporarily closed to the public, but the future holds promise. Then, I retrieved my grandfather's notebook. He once remarked that woodblock printing was too time-consuming and labor-intensive. If characters could be disassembled and reassembled to create new books for printing, it would reduce costs and carving time. Furthermore, the paper used for printing should be cheaper and more accessible to the common people, thereby enabling the widespread dissemination of knowledge and civilization. Both ideas were musings from his later years, spent lingering on his sickbed. He said that if successful, they would surely benefit all people. Grandfather's notes were somewhat disorganized, yet they detailed how to deconstruct woodblock printing. I became engrossed, studying day and night for half a month straight, endlessly disassembling and reassembling wooden blocks. Once I grasped the essentials, I commissioned a carpenter to craft a test block, but the results were unsatisfactory. Either the movable type swelled when wet, or the ink bled through the paper. Moreover, the paper itself was exorbitantly expensive, as was the ink. That evening at dinner, Xiaoxi noticed my distracted state. I was picking at my chopsticks instead of eating, and sighed deeply. "You've been working in isolation these days. Why not stroll through the marketplace? You might find inspiration." I nodded, set down my bowl, and prepared to leave. But he grabbed my head. "Finish your meal first." "Oh!" I obediently ate, my mind soon filling again with tangled thoughts. The next day, heeding Xiaoxi's advice, I wandered the streets. Passing by Chuanxi Hall, I felt an unusual craving and stepped inside to buy some treats to bring back, and for Xiaoxi to try. But as soon as I entered, I ran into 3 young ladies from the general's mansion. Their faces, which had been bright with joy, instantly turned cold and stern. The third Miss Chi rolled her eyes at me, her expression thick with contempt. "Oh, isn't this the ingrate? My brother treated her so well, yet she gambled away their betrothal for 10,000 taels of silver to support her poor little lover in the slums. Ha! What an ungrateful dog!" I shook my head at her, smiling faintly as I pulled out a stack of IOUs from my bosom. "Since you've chosen to present your face to me in this public place, don't blame me for being blunt." The 3 sisters watched the stack of notes I produced, their brows furrowing. They exchanged glances, inexplicably feeling uneasy. But being noble ladies, they couldn't simply flee in panic at my mysterious airs. Miss Chi glared at me, her face darkening. "What do you mean by this?" I looked at these 3 girls with pity, spoiled, ignorant of the world, skilled only in the intrigues of the inner quarters. I spoke slowly. 20 years ago, my grandfather saved old Master Chi's life. 10 years ago, when General Chi was trapped in Blackwind Fortress, it was my grandfather who lent silver to the Chi family to ransom him. In the years that followed, when the Chi family's business suffered losses, they borrowed thousands of taels of silver from us repeatedly to weather the crisis. As my grandfather's health deteriorated, he believed that given his kindness to the Chi family, they would never treat me unfairly. That is why the marriage between me and your brother was arranged. Now, it has been 4 years since my grandfather passed away. My year of mourning ended a year ago, yet the general's household delayed sending matchmakers. When I took the token to your residence, passing the gambling house, I saw the wagers the common folk had placed on me. Grief overwhelmed me. Others could see it clearly. Why did I remain blind? I decided to gamble boldly on my own fate. True enough, upon entering your residence, your father declared my timing for marriage demands was wrong. The 3 young ladies knew nothing of these inner workings, nor of Lady Luo's true intentions. Hearing me speak of it now in public, they knew trouble had come. They exchanged glances, seeking a quiet retreat, but I blocked the doorway. I waved the IOU in my hand. While organizing my grandfather's books recently, I uncovered these decades-old IOUs. After tallying them, the total exceeds 3,000 taels, equivalent to my grandfather's salary for 3 years. No wonder my grandfather, who served as chancellor his entire life, couldn't even afford to build a house. It turns out he was dealing with debt dodgers. Now that our families have no marital ties, I implore your noble general's mansion to abandon such thuggish tactics and repay the silver promptly. Surrounded by pointing fingers, the three young ladies' expressions darkened. Spoiled since childhood, they knew nothing of the general's mansion's deep-rooted corruption. Now that I'd exposed them, they realized the magnitude of their blunder. Trapped here by me, they instantly flew into a rage. Nonsense. Both your grandfather and mine have been dead for so long. Who can prove those IOUs are genuine? Perhaps you're just trying to smear us. Chi's third daughter, at least somewhat sharp-witted, retorted with a darkened face. This prince can attest. An elderly voice suddenly echoed from the doorway. I turned to see the venerable Prince Yen, well over 70, standing outside Chunshi Hall with a displeased expression. Who knew how long he'd been standing there, listening to everything? Greetings, Your Highness Prince Yen. My eyes instantly welled up as I knelt to pay respects. Upon recognizing the elder's status, everyone inside and outside the room immediately knelt in unison. The wise prince motioned for me to hand him the IOU. He flipped through it briefly before nodding. I was present when these were written. Your Chi family truly is utterly shameless. That old fool Yin Shiheo, his eyesight grows worse with age, his mind clouded. To entrust his precious granddaughter to ungrateful wretches like you. The three Chi sisters knelt pale-faced on the ground, looking as if they might faint at any moment. They had merely slandered me once, yet the entire general's mansion's reputation was utterly destroyed because of that single word. I sighed softly, thinking to myself, would Lady Luo go mad with fright upon hearing this news? For in my previous life, when Lady Luo grew senile, she rambled and revealed all these sordid affairs. She only mentioned that the silver grandfather Chi owed my grandfather was indeed repaid. But each time, it was entrusted to Lady Luo to return. Yet during those years, Lady Luo's maternal family business also hit rough patches. My grandfather was famously generous, lending silver to commoners without demanding receipts or repayment. So she secretly pocketed the silver, half sent to the Luo household, half spent on herself. When I learned this in my past life, my rage boiled over. I laced her medicine with poison, driving her mad in no time. In the dead of winter, she stumbled and fell into a pond. Rescued, she caught a severe chill and passed away shortly after. In this lifetime, I never wished for her death to be so swift. TSK. Perhaps I'll never learn to emulate my grandfather's magnanimity. With the old wise prince vouching for it, this matter is set in stone. The capital's common folk will have yet another topic for their after-dinner gossip. The old wise prince returned my IOU and personally helped me to my feet, my dear little one. It's been years since we last met. Hearing my dear little one, tears welled up in my eyes. Your Highness was so far away, little one couldn't even see you if she wanted to. Ah. Duty called. Now that I am old, I shall spend my twilight years here in the capital. But I have no children of my own, and the mansion feels so lonely. The old wise prince gazed at me with tender affection. In my past life, when he returned, I had already married into the general's household. We met briefly to catch up, but not long after he passed away from illness. Only I knew the truth, he hadn't been ill. With no loved ones left in the capital, consumed by grief for his departed wife and the children who had perished on the battlefield, he had taken his own life. I built the study according to the blueprints my grandfather drew long ago. If your Highness does not mind, I wish to care for you in your old age and see you through to the end. The old wise prince seemed to have been waiting for these words. His eyes reddened as he nodded repeatedly, good. Good. Very good indeed. By then, a crowd had gathered outside Chunshi Hall. Watching me lead the old wise prince home, their expressions varied. Some looked on with envy, others sighed. They murmured, a family that accumulates virtue will surely reap blessings. The next day, news spread from the general's residence, the wife had been divorced. Such a scandal had brought immense disgrace. Though the silver they'd embezzled had benefited the entire household, someone had to take the fall. Lady Luo, now old and faded, had been harsh toward General Chi's concubines, and he hadn't taken any new ones for years. Thus, Lady Luo was divorced, bearing all blame. The family sent the owed silver with interest, tore up the IOU, and the general's residence washed its hands of the matter. It was said that upon learning this, Chien, unable to bear his mother's lonely twilight years, severed ties with the general's residence altogether. He took his mother and 3 sisters to establish their own household. Simultaneously, he sent 2 solid gold safety locks and a letter. Lingyun, knowing you wish not to see me, I shall not trouble your eyes. But you must accept these gifts for the children. I also convey mother's apologies to you and Minister Yun. Her greed and folly, coupled with the general's household's ingratitude, brought this calamity upon them. Yet as a child, one cannot abandon filial duty. I hope you understand. Yen I examined the 2 pure gold safety locks closely. Just as in my past life, they were crafted by his own hands. Only the names engraved upon them differed from before, now inscribed were cloud dispelled in wind light. He had certainly done his research. After some thought, I accepted both golden locks. Truthfully, even without the old wise prince, I had ways to make the Luo family admit to the debt. It would have required some effort, perhaps even unscrupulous means. But with the old wise prince stepping in, his status and influence undeniable, it wouldn't just become true, even if it were false, it would be made true. That's how crucial power is. When my grandfather was alive, wasn't I a prized possession wherever I went? Now, though neglected, I'm still protected by his virtue. In my past life, whenever crisis struck, benefactors always aided me in secret. In this life, Xiaoxi treats me so well partly because I saved him, but his reverence for my grandfather is also a reason. My grandfather, though long gone, still protects his granddaughter. The miscellaneous scholarly manuscripts he left behind, after repeated sorting by me, the old wise prince, and Xiaoxi, have been recopied. Yet the progress of movable type printing still lags. But I never gave up. Frequenting the streets, I finally found new inspiration among clay sculptors and bricklayers. I had them collaborate with woodcarvers to fire a batch of clay movable type. These were then framed in wood and coated with an inexpensive ink, a mixture of black oil seeping from the grasslands and graphite. Over this, thick paper was laid, made from a pulp of river-soaked bamboo, pine needles, and weeds. The characters printed this time were crisp, the layout elegant, and most crucially, the cost was low. Moreover, the sturdy paper was more durable and, when bound into books, possessed a satisfying texture. You see, while Xian paper is excellent, its raw materials are costly. Add to that the price of ink in the original woodblock printing process, and books became a luxury item beyond the reach of ordinary households. After the first set of books was printed, I excitedly embraced Xiaoxi, kissing him and laughing, ha 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 ha. Did you see that? I succeeded! I did! His face flushed, his eyes sparkling as he looked at me. Old Prince Yen stood nearby, playing with my little ones, Yun Dan and Feng Qing, pretending not to notice us. Those 2 little rascals could already walk, spending their days tugging old Prince Yen around the gardens, pulling all sorts of silly, adorable faces that kept him smiling constantly. After supper that evening, the old wise prince held the book I'd printed and some movable type accessories, his expression grave as he looked at me. Nan Nan, come with me to the palace. If this hadn't been made, it wouldn't matter. But now that it exists, I might not be able to keep it. We must present it. I understood his meaning. Agreed. Over the years, woodblock printing and the precious Xian paper and ink had developed robust commercial chains. Moreover, most of these businesses were controlled by wealthy aristocratic families. What I had created was essentially slapping them in the face and snatching their livelihood, wasn't it? Late at night, we entered the palace. The old wise prince and I knelt before His Majesty, who had just passed 40. His Majesty set aside the memorials and carefully examined the item we brought. Recognizing it as something I had created using my grandfather's handwritten notes, he regarded it with particular interest. You tell me this book was produced at an extremely low cost. How low? I straightened my back, my expression proud. Your Majesty, including all labor costs for movable type printing, this book cost 1 tael of silver. However, the movable type characters can be disassembled, rearranged, and reused repeatedly. Thus, the more books printed, the lower the cost per copy. The emperor nodded, then inquired further, if we exclude the carving and firing of the type, counting only paper, binding, and ink, what would the cost be? I couldn't help but smile, replying with measured confidence, "Your Majesty, merely 10 cash coins." 10 cash? The Emperor's jaw dropped in astonishment, his hands trembling slightly as he held the book. A hand-copied book on the market, even in elementary text like the 3-character classic, costs half a liang of silver, or 500 cash. Its production costs alone must be at least 300 cash. Yet yours requires a mere 10 cash. His Majesty's eyes reddened with emotion as he gazed at me, as if seeing my late grandfather through my presence. The Chancellor has left us a true treasure. Attendants! Draft an imperial decree appointing Yunling Yun as 6th-rank Assistant Director of the Ministry of Works. The ministry shall establish a printing bureau and a paper manufacturing bureau, and open Confucian academies nationwide, all under Yunling Yun's supervision. 6th-rank Assistant Director of the Ministry of Works. In that instant, tears welled in my eyes. I bowed deeply in gratitude. "Thank you for your Majesty's profound grace." Though our dynasty had a system for female officials, those who truly qualified were exceedingly rare. My ability to hold office was due to my grandfather's influence. But the old wise prince saw it differently. "Your grandfather left behind notes, yet he himself never succeeded in creating the device. You achieved it through your own research, that is your true ability. How you will now ensure everyone in the realm can afford books, that will prove your true worth." That day, clutching my official robes, I embarked on a path utterly different from my past life. "Thank you for your guidance, grandfather," the wise prince. My appointment to the court became a marvelous topic of discussion among the common folk. The Ministry of Works and the Ministry of War have always been deeply interconnected departments. Though their locations were quite distant, personnel frequently moved between them. News arrived from the northern frontier of D tribes raiding border towns. Qi Yan, already stationed at the Ministry of War, volunteered to lead the northern expedition. Thus, when I took my post at the Ministry of Works, I never encountered him. Instead, I often crossed paths with the ink-dark-skinned General Qi, who came to verify the types and progress of weapon forging. Fortunately, my responsibilities had no overlap with his, sparing me awkward small talk and forced compliance. But one day, as he passed by, he snorted coldly, "A hen crowing at dawn." I lazed out a reply, "A corpse occupying a post." Watching his face darken further, I rolled my eyes elegantly and returned to my department. In the days that followed, I led my workers in a frantic rush to produce movable type printing components, while also expanding the paper-making workforce. Upon seeing the movable type printing I had created, the Minister of Works was deeply gratified. Perhaps recalling my grandfather, tears welled in his old eyes. This old servant once mocked the Chancellor for his fanciful dreams. Little did I imagine they would be realized through your hands. A golden age dawns for scholars across the land. I shook my head, watching the laboring workers, and sighed. My grandfather once said the world harbors prejudice against educating women. They should not be confined by conventions, trapped within the inner chambers their entire lives. When I established the National Learning Society, I wished to reserve a small corner for women. The Minister of Works gazed at me deeply, then shook his head gently. The Chancellor did indeed speak these words, yet he never saw them implemented in his lifetime. Why do you think that was? I pursed my lips and sighed, fear of shaking the foundations of the state and stirring chaos. The Minister of Works nodded, yet men's political education has persisted for millennia, while women excel mostly in poetry. We cannot deny many women possess great intelligence, but their nature leans toward affection, and affection breeds partiality, which easily disrupts order. Moreover, bearing children demands immense physical and emotional energy from women. Some fertile women bear over a dozen children in their lifetime. Even the most talented among them struggle to sustain their pursuits amidst such intermittent childbearing. Thus, cultivating a man costs far less than cultivating a woman. But isn't this also society's biased definition of women? I disagree. If women aren't taught to place their husbands above all else, how could they become sentimental? If couples practiced monogamy and had only one child each, raising it together, how could women be burdened by childbirth? The root of the problem lies in foundational education. Solving this likely won't happen overnight. But every endeavor must begin somewhere. I still wish to try. The Minister of Works gazed at me silently for a long while, then sighed deeply. He said nothing more, merely bowed his head to organize his documents. Over the next 5 years, movable type printing, coupled with inexpensive paper and ink, was taken up by imperial merchants who swiftly opened up the market. The interests of the great aristocratic families suffered severe damage. I consequently faced numerous retaliatory assassination attempts. Fortunately, His Majesty had made arrangements long ago, deploying covert guards among my entourage to eliminate those threats. Moreover, it seemed a mysterious figure of extraordinary martial prowess remained by my side. Even the most skilled assassins could not withstand more than a few exchanges against him. I learned of this one night when I witnessed him dispatch over a dozen assassins in mere moments, leaving the back garden drenched in blood. By the time I recovered from my shock, he had vanished. Instead, Xiaoxi emerged limping from the outhouse, claiming he'd startled himself upon encountering a black-clad figure and stumbled in the darkness. I gave a wry smile, resignedly helping him back to his quarters to rest. My inner voice grumbled, "Truly, scholars are useless." Over these 5 years, I had my grandfather's entire library printed and donated to the Imperial Academy of Learning, established by the court. The books were met with widespread acclaim. However, as the Imperial Academy spread to major cities across the land, the practice of segregating male and female students in separate classrooms drew mixed reactions. As a result, petitions from many scholars and officials piled up on His Majesty's desk. Fortunately, His Majesty was a wise ruler. He suppressed these complaints and issued an edict announcing to the realm, henceforth, every 5 years, a special imperial examination for women would be held. The requirement was clear: candidates must demonstrate excellence equal to that of men to qualify. No favoritism would be shown simply because they were women. Furthermore, they must sign an agreement pledging to bear no more than 2 children in their lifetime. Those who exceeded this limit would be dismissed from their posts. Though still demanding for women, this offered them a new path filled with hope. Some women even took sterilization pills, dedicating themselves wholly to their studies, determined to compete with men for supremacy. Over the past 5 years, Qi Yan had achieved remarkable military exploits, becoming a favored figure in the current emperor's court and being granted the title of General of the Northern Frontier. 2 years ago, I was promoted to Assistant Minister of Works, serving alongside him in the court. This meant we saw each other daily. Thus, the atmosphere during court sessions inevitably carried a touch of awkwardness. Thankfully, he no longer troubled me. Soon after, Xiaoxi entered the imperial examinations and won first place, becoming the new top scholar. I smiled and asked, "Didn't you say that since you've already reached the heights, it holds no meaning for you anymore?" He wrapped his arm around my waist and gave a cold snort. "My dear, you attend court every morning, debating with old acquaintances in the halls of government. If your husband doesn't climb higher, what if one day I lose both my wife and children? Wouldn't that mean I'm sewing a wedding dress for someone else?" His teasing tone made me chuckle. I took his hand and placed it on my lower abdomen. "But now that you're the top scholar, you'll soon be appointed to office. Who will care for me during my pregnancy and confinement then?" His eyes widened in shock. His gaze grew hopeful as his hand trembled slightly against my belly. You're pregnant?" I nodded, gazing at him tenderly. "I've already requested a year's leave from His Majesty. It's perfect timing to lie low. Your official post will also cover my lost salary, so our family won't be left out in the cold." He suddenly pulled me close, burying his head in my shoulder, his breath damp against my skin. "All right. Your husband will join the Ministry of Works too, holding your position for you." The following year, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. This time was more perilous. Our daughter was breech, and I endured a night of excruciating pain, nearly failing to recover. Fortunately, the imperial physicians arrived in time. They used acupuncture to steady my qi and had the midwife manually correct the baby's position. Finally, our little daughter was born. During my confinement, Xiaoxi silently requested a potion from the imperial physician, a concoction that would render him childless. When I learned of this, I felt both deeply moved and heartbroken. I had heard that such medicine was exceedingly harmful to the body. That night, as we lay close together, we sorted through the events of our past and present lives. We marveled at life's impermanence, yet were grateful to heaven for granting us a second chance. Another year passed. News arrived from the frontier. Qi Yan had met with disaster. Refusing the Miao woman's offer to heal him with the heart-binding curse, he succumbed to his severe injuries. His body rotted away, and he died. Upon receiving the news, I remained unsettled for a long time. Holding 7-year-old Yundan Fengqing, I sat quietly for the entire afternoon. Children are sensitive. Sensing my distress, they quietly kept me company without fuss. The following month, a letter arrived. Lingyun, that night I hid outside your bedroom, listening to you and that man pour out your hearts. So you both have past lives. In your past life, I wronged you. You've been unfair to me. I'm not the man from your past life. How could you know I'd betray you too? Look, I won't betray you. Yan Xiaoxi snorted after reading it. That's the you of this life, the dazzling sun he could never possess. If not for these events, he'd still choose the bond-binding charm. I shook my head and sighed. He should have chosen the heart-binding spell. After all, this world holds more than just love. Qi Yan died in battle. Lady Luo, devastated, descended into madness. She stumbled and fell into the water, her body discovered only the next day. With the general's mansion crumbling, everyone turned against them. General Qi was accused of embezzling military funds, stripped of his title, and his family's assets confiscated. The two remaining young masters supposedly journeyed south to seek their fortunes, their whereabouts now unknown. The 3 married daughters, disgraced by their mother's family's downfall, were divorced by their husbands and cast out. These 3 ladies, however, possessed some spirit. They took their children to live in Qian's old residence, secluding themselves to study and research military strategy, preparing to take the upcoming imperial examinations for women. After Qian's death, Xiaoxi found himself troubled. Qian died too young. With the great Qian kingdom's borders unstable, what are we to do? Very well, I shall take the military examinations myself. I raised an eyebrow, looking at him with surprise. You know martial arts? I'd always thought him a scholarly weakling, otherwise, how could he have been so utterly crushed upon first meeting? Years later, I learned he was actually a famed scholar judge in the Wuyun region of Chihu Lake. After rejecting the daughter of the Wuyun alliance leader, a bounty was placed on his head. The people of Wuyun knew no martial honor, ambushes, poisonings, relentless assaults. Even iron couldn't withstand such pressure. After a year of struggle, Xiaoxi fled in disarray, seeking refuge in the capital. He blended into the imperial court, carving out a new path for survival. Xiaoxi took Qian's place on the northern frontier battlefield. Armed with memories from his past life, he managed to perform nearly as well as Qian. Yet after every victory, he couldn't help but sigh, what a waste of Qian. Our time together was scarce, much like my situation with Qian in my previous life. He often invited me to live in the northern frontier, yet I remained more focused on the educational challenges facing women and their prospects after gaining knowledge. He constantly complained that I cared more about my duties than him. Yet I would always say, beyond love, this world holds so many things worthy of my passion. I cherish you, I cherish our children, and I cherish this vast world. If you bloom, the breeze will come. The story ends here. Thank you all for your companionship. See you in the next chapter.